Welcome to the Relationship Series podcast. My name is Ankush Jain, and each episode I'll be speaking to a different state of mind expert on the subject of relationships. Enjoy. Welcome to episode 45 of the Relationship Series. This week I'm joined by Fiona Lukeis from Australia, who works for a company called The Relationship Place. Fiona is a coach who specializes in relationships, as you might have guessed from her company name. And what she's really passionate about is pulling back the stigma around getting help. Hi Fiona, glad to have you with us.
Thank you, Ankush. Very happy to be here.
Thank you. The interesting thing, Fiona, is I've interviewed people so far who I've known myself, different state of mind experts that I've interviewed, and you were really a recommendation. You were someone that I didn't know extremely well. In fact, we'd never spoken or connected before. But it's been great. One of our listeners recommended that I should really speak to you and have you on the show, and it's been nice connecting a few weeks ago, and then today sitting down to record this. So I'm looking forward to this interview.
Yeah, me too, Ankush. I really, really am. I think it's. I'm very happy to be here and to share whatever it is I can to add value if possible. I know you've interviewed many people, which is wonderful, and I think what you're doing here is a wonderful, wonderful thing.
What I love starting with, Fiona, with all of our interviewees is how did you become both a relationship coach and also a state of mind expert? And I know they weren't hand in hand. I know that you started with one and then moved to the other. So for people who don't know you, give us a little bit of background around what you do now and how you got there.
Yeah, sure. Well, I've got my business, The Relationship Place, has been practicing now for around 6 years, and the reason why I really went into this niche or this area of work is, and I think this is pretty common with a lot of people. It was a personal experience that I had. I had a relationship breakdown around 15, 16 years ago now, and I had two very, very young little boys at the time, and we went to get help, and I just felt really let down by the quality of the help that was out there. And I remember feeling at the time that, if this is what's available to people, then no wonder so many people are struggling. And I also remember thinking, it was probably quite arrogant when I look back on it now, I remember thinking, I'm sure I could do better than this. And, that thought just bubbled away in the back of my mind for a little while as the relationship broke down and I adjusted to being a single mum with two little boys and all of that entailed. And it wasn't until I met my now husband. We've been married for 12 years. And it wasn't until our second child was quite young that this voice that I had to do something about that really started to get stronger and stronger and stronger. And it got to a point where I couldn't ignore it anymore. And so I went and did some training. And from there, really it became clearer and clearer to me that this was the area that I wanted to work in. I'd also seen the impact of the breakdown of that relationship on my two little boys, compared to the two children that I'd had with my husband and the differences between them. And what really struck me, Ankush, and that I think is something that we all need to be more aware of is, when you go to get some help around your relationship, or when you decide that you want things to be different, it's a decision that you're not just making for you. It's a decision that you're making for generations of people. Because, the way you love, the way that you communicate, the way that you resolve conflicts, the way that you move forward when life hits, okay, and life hits, really is something that your children are absorbing and mirroring and mimicking. And so, when you decide that the two of you are gonna do something better than this, that you want something more out of your relationship, that you don't want to just get by, when you make that decision, and I know it's not an easy decision for people, but when you do, it's a decision that you're making for generations of your family. And I think that's a really important thing for people to remember, because I often see with the clients that come into my practice, patterns of thinking, patterns of handling things that go back generations, that have been around from mum, dad, grandma, grandpa, that kind of thing. And obviously innocently, unwittingly, that they're there. And, so often when I say that to people, it gives people that extra, you're right, that extra spur to go through the process of getting help and turning things around, and the uncomfortability that can come with that. And because it's generations of people that are at stake with this. And this stuff really, really, really matters.
That's quite a powerful statement, really, to say, and it's not something that I'd really thought of before you said that. But I guess I can see that being true for people that learn from what they see growing up. There are some people who say that that's not necessarily the case. I know one chap that I met who said that he didn't buy into that, and that maybe it does relate to what you're saying, and that those patterns can be broken. He said that there are a lot of people who say that that they act out in relationships exactly how they saw, and he said that all he saw was violence violence and abuse, and he was locked in a cupboard, and really, really bad childhood. But he goes, I'm nothing like that. And so he goes, I don't buy into this when I see, for him, men acting out with women. And he was a real big believer of change, and you don't have to do the same as what you see. It sounds like you're saying yes, that's true, but it can be done through a conscious change and a desire to change.
Yes, that's right. I think it's that people are unwittingly doing this. It's not deliberate. It's not. I don't necessarily think people are excusing their behaviour by saying, "Oh, well, my parents did that, so it's okay for me." I just think we're often unaware of what we're automatically doing, and and then it's not until you become aware that you've got an opportunity to change that. And of course, there are always going to be exceptions to that. I'm certainly not saying that it's across the board that if you've had this experience, then you're going to be this kind of person. Not at all. But I think what tends to happen is it can even be the smallest thing, like, some people come to me and say, I never saw my parents have a fight. And so when I started having an argument with my husband, I thought that meant we were just going to get divorced. I didn't know that you could resolve conflict. I'd never seen it resolved before. To me, conflict meant the end of the world. So every time we had a fight, I was kind of packing my bags and ready to call the divorce lawyer. And my husband would be really blasé and say, it's not that big a deal, honey. This is what happens. And she'd be like, well, in my experience, that doesn't happen. So it's more, just these subtle things that we pick up that we don't even realize we're doing. And absolutely there's exceptions to that, because for sure we're all free thinkers and we have free will. But we do at times pick up conditioned thinking and conditioned responses that I think are quite unconscious to a lot of people.
So I know that when you first started training and you started working with couples, you didn't really use what we would call a state of mind approach. What shifted? Why did you shift to a different way of working with couples? What was behind that?
Well, I think for me it was a couple of things. I could feel that some of the things that I was teaching people. So I would teach people a lot of things around masculine and feminine energy and where our needs come from and how to meet each other's needs and all this kind of thing. But what I noticed was that instead of that knowledge empowering people, it often gave people more reason to feel resentful. because they'd kind of come away saying, well, the reason I'm masculine is because you're too feminine, and until you can become more masculine, I can't help being the way I am. So you need to change. Or people would feel, well, I've told you what it is I need to be happy, and we've spelled it out now, so you can't tell me that you didn't know and you're not doing it. So it increased the very thing that is very detrimental in relationships, which is, the resentment and the frustration and the judgment that we really struggle as human beings to handle. Because, there's a reason why public speaking is considered a fear worse than death for so many people, because we have this fear of being judged. We lose our bearings. We're not at our best. We don't thrive when we feel judged. And, often in a relationship that's in trouble, that's the predominant thing that's happening. So for me, it was seeing that play out and questioning, thinking, hang on a minute, there's something not right here. This is not what I was. And of course, it didn't play out with everyone. It was just a very up and down kind of response that I was seeing, and I started to have this unease around it. I started to think there's something missing here. I don't know what it is that's missing, but there's something missing. And then, interestingly enough, I found my marriage to be in trouble, and this would be around 5 years ago. 6 years ago, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I found my own marriage to be in trouble, and all this knowledge that I had was not helping. And so it was the combination of the fact that, well, this is what I do for a living, and my own marriage is in trouble, and with all the knowledge that I have, it's not helping me, and the fact that I had some clients who were getting extraordinary results and some not so great, and I couldn't understand why it was so different, why there was such a difference in scale between people's results. And so it was a combination of those two things that had me go looking for something else. And it was a long journey. I looked at many different things. I studied many different things. But it was really the discovery of what I now know and what I now teach people that transformed my marriage overnight, really. And really transformed the way I work with clients and the results that my clients get. Instead of my clients kind of being up and down, there was this universal response to things, which I found incredible and so exciting.
And so that kind of brings us to where we are now, I guess. So you've been around this space, should I say, or helping people for a long time. You've then gone and done some training. You've helped people. You now look in the state of mind direction because you find it more effective. So Fiona, sometimes I like playing devil's advocate on this and put my mind or my perspective in that of someone who's very new to this, who's someone who's new to you. Maybe this is the first episode they've ever heard, and especially around the theme of removing stigma around getting help. That someone might be listening to this and saying, well, Fiona, what you're telling us is that, you had problems in your relationship and you went and got some help. And then when you were helping people, you had some mixed results. And now you're doing this state of mind stuff, they might think. Why should they come to you for help? Why can you help them, or why should they go to anyone for help? Why can someone else help them, and why should they listen to you?
Yeah, look, I think that's a really great question, Ankush. And if you are someone who's asking yourself that or thinking that, I think it's a really great question to ask. I think, first of all, what I think is really important and something that I spend quite a bit of time with my potential clients doing is having them really ask themselves, well, you've had a chat with me or whoever it is you may potentially be looking to work with. Do you feel comfortable with that person? Do you feel that person will hear you? Do you feel that they're impartial, as in they can listen to you and listen to your partner without favouring one or the other, which I think is a big fear for a lot of people? Am I going to be able to talk to this person and share things with them? And do I feel comfortable spending time with them? Because the fact of the matter is, when I'm working with a couple, we spend quite a bit of time together, and I get to know a lot about both of them. So I think that's a really important part of it. You've got to feel comfortable with the person, and you both need to. It needs to be a mutual decision that you make. if you're coming to see someone together. In saying that, it is definitely possible if your partner's not interested or resistant to the idea that it can be you who's starts the process off, or who does the entire or goes through the entire process on their own. I've got a number of clients who do that. Their partners are very resistant to it, and I can reassure you, if that's the case, that one person can make a difference, one person can make a change. It doesn't have to involve both parties. And then I think what is also really, really important about that is what's very different, and I do express this to my clients, is whatever I share with you is something that I have seen in my own life, something that I have lived through, something that I know works, something that I know makes a difference. And I'm very real with what I share with people, very, very real. I'm not here to tell you that I'm perfect and I've got my life worked out and I've got the perfect marriage. My husband and I have conflict from time to time. We don't always agree on things, but we have an incredible amount of resilience. We move through conflict incredibly well. We remain close whilst we are going through conflict. And I think that's a foreign concept for a lot of people, because most of us approach conflict as this thing that means, we're in a battlefield and we're at opposite ends of the battleground, and there's there's going to be a cold war until someone gives in. And, my husband and I still feel close even when we're experiencing conflict. And it's because of what I now have an understanding around with this state of mind and how that impacts relationships. So I think what's really important is I'm not here to change someone. I'm really not. I think a lot of the fear that people have around getting help is the fact that maybe someone's going to sit down and tell me that I'm wrong, that I've been doing everything wrong, that I have to completely change. And what if I can't do that? What if I can't change? What if I don't have what it takes? What if my deepest fears are going to be realized? It's scary for people, or it can be intimidating for people, or uncomfortable. And what I'm here to say is you can change your relationship without changing you. You don't have to change. What needs to change is your perspective. And perspective is a very, very different thing. When your perspective shifts, then everything flows from there. And it flows in a way that is magical for the two of you, not some sort of system or strategy that kind of applies to everyone. It's having an insight or seeing something that applies to the two of you that's really pertinent to the two of you, personal to the two of you. And I think having that understanding is really, really, really important. So, if you are someone who's thinking, gee, I wouldn't mind getting some help, but I'm worried that whoever I see is going to tell me that I'm a terrible person because I have lost my temper before, or I have been unreasonable, or I've done things that I'm not proud of, then I want to reassure you that that's not what this is all about. People don't thrive when you look in that direction. And, you've got to be in a place where you're thriving, where you're feeling good, where you're at your most effective to be able to make the changes in your relationship that you want to change. So looking down the path of what you've done wrong and going over all of that isn't going to necessarily have you thrive. And that's what I'm interested in, is what's going to have you thrive so that you're listening optimally, you're making the most of your own natural resources, you're able to come from a place of compassion and understanding, because you're not sitting in a defensive, fear-based place worried that I'm going to show you up or I'm going to attack you for the things that you've done. Does that make sense?
I'm so loving what you're saying, Fiona, and it makes so much sense, because I see this applies in areas more than just relationships, because I know I'm someone who tried to change myself. I guess I was the opposite, rather than not wanting someone to tell me to change, I thought I had to. And I used to think I had to change other people too. Which, as you can imagine, didn't really work very well. So this whole idea about you not having to change, but change your perspective, in some ways, I'm just writing a book at the moment, which isn't necessarily about relationships, but that is the central theme of what I'm writing about, that it's not about having to change who we are, it's about recognizing who we are. And I think that
Absolutely.
when it comes to relationships, I know I've done this, whether it's romantic, whether it's family, whether it's friends. I've sometimes assumed that when people are acting out, when people are upset or frustrated or they have a blip, I assume, oh, now they're showing their true colors. That's who they really are. And I used to judge them from that place, as opposed to how do they act 99% of the time, or 95% of the time, when they're absolutely fine and wonderful. And that's who we really are. And that's what I really heard from what you just said.
Absolutely. I think the norm that's out there, the accepted common thing is, if your partner plays up or you play up or you act in a way that you don't feel great about, then you need to feel bad about that. You need to you need to kind of suffer the consequences, right? And that it's natural that your partner suffer the consequences, or you do, that you pay a price for that. And what we don't realize is that when we operate from that paradigm, it's so much harder to feel closer again. It's so much harder to feel good again, to thrive again. It takes so much longer to get back to where you were. And as I heard, I was listening to a recording of George Pransky's recently, and he was talking about forgiveness. And I love what he had to say about this, because he was saying that, forgiveness has two elements. The first element is the forgiveness of a person, and the second element is the forgiveness of life. And I thought that was just brilliant, because I thought that's so true. We so often can struggle to come back to a place of well-being, or come back to a place of feeling good, because we need to kind of there's two things that we need to really look at around that. It's being okay with and letting go of whatever we perceive to be that our partner has done, and then it's whatever stuff or thinking we have around life, around all the stuff that we feel around life, whether it be, I'm married to the wrong person, I've made a mistake, I'm not good at choosing men, or I'm not good at choosing women, or I'm really bad at relationships, or whatever it is that we've got going on. And so, if you can move past one, but if you haven't moved past the other, then you kind of get stuck, which is what I think happens to a lot of people. And it's so important to be able to see things from that perspective and go, okay, well, just because my partner has acted in a way that I'm not happy with, or I've acted in a way that I'm not happy with, doesn't mean that I need to be in solitary confinement, doesn't mean that we have to have a cold war for X amount of time before we're allowed to feel close again. And I think that is definitely unconsciously playing out for a lot of people.
So you talk about two paradigms in relationship, and I think you started to touch on it there about, proving yourself right, and that's how a lot of people operate. And I used to operate in that way. I would be lying if I would say that there's not elements of that still within me.
Same with me, Ankush, absolutely.
And we've had other people on this show who say, this isn't about being walked over. This isn't about being weak. You can let things go. And we spoke before the show as well about that. It's not about being weak. How do people decide about that, or I'd love to explore that on this conversation, because it's not something we've maybe explored in detail before. That, let's say someone's having a relationship issue, and what I love about all these questions is, I think today we're very much talking about romantic relationships, but it applies just as much to, say with your boss, or anyone else that you're having conflict with. And that thought may go through people's mind, I don't want to be pushed over. I've been pushed over my whole life. I want to make a stand for myself. I want to finally, stick up for myself. And that can feel a step forward for people. It can feel empowering for people. How do we, or how do you distinguish between letting things go and not retaliating, and therefore coming back to a good state of mind and having a good relationship with someone, and not be walked over, versus just give in to someone and really not be treated well and be walked over, and end up being quite unhappy?
Yeah, sure. Great question, Ankush. Well, I think first of all, let's just say we're looking at the perspective of someone who gives in, who is getting walked over. If someone is in a situation where they feel that way, what they perhaps don't realize is that they've got an incredible amount on their mind. And when we have a lot on our mind, when we're constantly cycling around the same type of thinking, what happens is we don't have clarity. And when we don't have clarity, the one thing we don't have access to is conviction. And I think conviction is incredibly powerful in any relationship, in any area of your life. Because when we have conviction, we are compelling. And when we have conviction and we are compelling, it's so much easier to speak our truth. It's so much easier to see what we need. It's so much easier to know how to handle, know how to move forward. But when we've got a lot on our mind, when we're cycling around the same thinking, what tends to happen is we cycle around the same behaviors, because, whether it be a fear of something or whatever it might be, it keeps us kind of stuck in that same paradigm. Then let's look at someone who perhaps gets really fiery and angry and expressive and loud. It's the same thing. When you've got a lot on your mind, what people don't realize is they're cycling around the same thinking. And when you're cycling around the same thinking, what you don't have is clarity, and what you don't have is conviction. And if you're wanting something to change in your relationship, if you're wanting to operate at a different level, you need those two things. In fact, there's three things you need, but we'll just talk about those two right now. Clarity and conviction are incredibly powerful. And it doesn't matter, as you say, who you're dealing with, whether it be a boss, a family member, a friend, your partner, children. When we don't have that, that's when people really lose their bearings. That's when people are not at their best emotionally. That's when we become what I consider to be quite emotionally unintelligent. And we can all be emotionally unintelligent. That's a human thing, and it goes across the board, regardless of age or gender or level of intelligence or education. So, when we become less intelligent, that tends to happen emotionally, that tends to happen when we've got a lot on our mind, when we're cycling around the same thinking, and when we don't have clarity, when we don't have conviction. So what I would be saying to someone is, instead of looking in the direction of how do I stop being walked over, how do I stop acting this way, how do I change my partner, I would be more curious. And I'd be more interested in then looking in the direction of how can I get more clarity around this situation? What would it be like for me if I had conviction over what really mattered to me? And I had conviction in a way where it didn't matter what my partner or someone else felt, that I was able to speak from that place, that I was able to love from that place. And when we can see that, when we value that, then we have a very different way of responding to conflict, to clashes of interest, to things that perhaps aren't going the way we'd like them to go. Now, in saying that, I just want to say that I think there is a third element that is incredibly important here, and this is something that's becoming more and more apparent to me, and that is the element of curiosity. I think when we've got a lot on our mind, we become less curious. And I think a lack of curiosity is very problematic in relationships. You know, when our partner does something that we don't like, instead of being curious around what's going on with them, we tend to retaliate. We stop exploring what's going on. We stop wondering what's behind the content of what they're saying. You know, and a lot of people will when I first tell them this, will look at me and go, but don't I need to react to what they're saying? Because I'm a big believer in that the content of what someone's saying is not the most important thing. It's the spirit behind it that really matters. And when we're reactionary, when we've got a lot on our mind, we lose that curiosity to find out the spirit of what's behind something, what's the spirit that's behind what's going on for that person. And it's our ability to remain curious. It's our ability to have less on our mind that enables us to get the clarity and the conviction that we really truly need. Because with those things, you will know what the next thing is for you. And I think that's really important, because what's the next thing for someone is not going to be the next thing for someone else. And I am not here to tell someone what their next thing should be. It's got to be something that someone discovers for themselves. And the best place to discover that is from a place of clarity and conviction within you. And that is difficult. I'm not saying it's not possible, but it's difficult when you've got a lot on your mind.
So how would someone know? I'm thinking about this from someone who's brand new listening to this. How would they know they've got these things? Because the conviction part, I just speak for myself, can see there were times when I was really certain I was right, and I felt like I had the conviction. And it also looked like I had the clarity, because I was certain I was right, and I was I've never been so clear in my life. You were absolutely wrong. And I'm curious about, why would you act like such an idiot? You know, which is not what you're saying. I understand. I'm just trying to flesh out and get more clarity around it, really. How do we know, or how does someone listening to this know that they've got the clarity, conviction, curiosity that you point to? Because I'm sure you're not saying it in the way that I've said that, because it can look like that. It can be very subtle.
Yeah, for sure. Well, first of all, if you're angry and self-righteous, you don't have clarity and conviction. What you have is anger and self-righteousness. Okay, so anger and self-righteousness can feel that way because they feel quite powerful. You know, there's nothing more powerful than, you know, being angry and being right and proving your point. It does actually feel good in a bizarre way, and it can have people momentarily feel like they're on track. Okay, and it can be distracting, and it can be what's the word I'm trying to come up with? It's a bit of an illusion, all right, that we can get lost in temporarily, that I'm angry, you've touched a chord within me, I can see the truth here, and I know I'm right. But if you're coming from that space, I promise you don't have clarity and conviction, because clarity and conviction don't come from that place. They don't feel like that. Clarity and conviction feel different. And I promise you, if you're angry, you don't have any curiosity, right? Anger and curiosity can't coexist. You know, it's because when we're angry, we're too busy proving our point. We're too busy defending our position. We're too busy playing what I call emotional ping pong. How can you be curious when you're too busy focused on returning the ball? Curiosity is more about letting the shot go past and seeing where your partner's at. Curiosity is saying, hey, I want to know more about that. I don't agree with you, but I want to know more about that. How come that matters to you so much? Why is that important to you? I want to understand more. I want to know you more. I want to understand this, because I can see it really matters to you. And if it matters to you, then it matters to me. So how can I understand this better? Help me understand. Now, that's really different to saying, well, you know what? Because of what you did last week, that means that I have to do this, 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 and this. So if you don't start doing this, then right? You can see there's a completely different paradigm. Now, if you sit there and you say to yourself, if you're angry and you've got someone sitting there looking at you with compassion and understanding and wanting to know more, what do you think is going to happen to your anger? Where do you think that's going to go? Do you think it's going to continue? It's really hard to be angry when you've got someone looking at you with compassion and they're not reacting and they're not judging you. They're looking at you with love. They're looking at you from a place of, hey, I don't know, I don't understand, but I want to. Can you help me understand? That feeling of you matter to me, we all want to feel that way. We all want to know that we matter. And knowing that your partner cares enough to let go of their ego, to let go of what's right and wrong, to put it to one side and look at you and be curious, that's the most extraordinary thing. That's the greatest gift you can give another human being. Now, it's very difficult for you to give that gift when you are in a paradigm of righteousness, judgment, and defensiveness, when you've got a lot on your mind. So clarity comes. You know that you're moving in that direction when you're not reacting, when you're not taking personally where your partner's at, where you're more curious of understanding where they're coming from. When you want to know why something matters to someone, even if they have a completely different value to you. Like, for example, if, say, you've got one person who loves to go out and socialize and another person who once a month would be enough for them. Well, okay, I want to understand that more. Teach me why going out every weekend really matters to you. What do you get from that? Talk to me about it. I want to understand. Well, how come you don't like going out so much? Share with me how you feel around that, because maybe there's something I'm missing. This is what creates openness and trust and the foundation of knowing that you have each other's back. That's definitely something that people come to me and say that's missing. I don't feel like my partner has my back. That's how you create that.
I think that's such a great point, and thanks for answering that. And I was just thinking, what a gift in any kind of relationship to bring curiosity to it.
Mm.
And I think all of the three things that you said really interrelate, because it's not, to me, it's not about doing curiosity. And before I came before I came to the principles behind State of Mind, I used to try and do curiosity, and it worked sometimes, but not a lot of the time. But what I found is when we're operating from a clearer head, that curiosity is a byproduct of that, and it is just so helpful, like genuine, real, open curiosity in any kind of relationship.
It certainly is, and it really matters so much. And what I find extraordinary is I can be working with a couple that have been in a battlefield for years, right? They're at war and they don't know how else to be. And they start valuing curiosity. They start seeing how good it feels, because it feels good. Like, I can feel on the call, the feeling has changed in this call for me. And I don't know if anyone else listening can hear this, but I feel differently right now. Feel in a deeper feeling. And that feeling is so addictive. It feels so good. It's almost like when you get a taste of it, you just want more of it. So it doesn't make sense to get all angry and resentful and defensive, because you know that it doesn't feel good. And when you see how good you can feel and how great that feels and how great it is for your partner, it becomes, and I see this with people, it doesn't make sense to go to war anymore, Fiona. I don't know how we did that for so long. Why did we do that when we could be doing this?
Well, thank you for that, Fiona. I mean, this has been a really wonderful and a hopeful episode, I think, for people that are in all kinds of relationships, but certainly romantic relationships, who may be struggling. If people do want to find out more about you, or if they would like to get in contact with you, what's the best way that they can do that?
Yeah, sure, Ankush. They can go to my website, www.therelationshipplace.com.au, and they can find out everything they need from there, and they can contact me through there, and or they can look me up on Facebook, The Relationship Place.
Thank you. And people, as always, can find me through my website, which is www.ankushjain.co.uk, ANKUSHJAIN.co.uk, where you can find, through the blog tab, all the previous episodes that I've done and links to iTunes, Stitcher, direct download, YouTube, everywhere that I post this episode and all the other episodes. Thank you so much for joining us today, Fiona, and I look forward to speaking with the listeners next time.
Thanks, Ankush. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to the Relationship Series podcast. If you want to hear more, you can click the subscribe button below. You can share this and impact someone else who can benefit, or you can like it and encourage others to listen. Also, it'd be great if you leave me a comment below, as I always love hearing from listeners and I want to keep creating great content for you. Thanks for listening.